this. I mean, you could tell when Prime Minister Erdogan was here that one issue on which he's quite emotional is that, and it's very it has great weight in public opinion in Turkey as well. So clearly there are differences there. So that's another one. And then finally we come to Iran. And here on the nuclear issue, I think there has been a desire in Washington, a feeling that, all right, Turkey has its own reasons to have an independent and improved relationship with Tehran. Please use that relationship to take tough messages to Tehran on the nuclear issue. My own sense is that in many different circles in Washington, people are losing confidence in whether that message is being delivered. And this is a particularly difficult issue for Turkey because it forces Turkey to choose between many, many competing pulls. Turkey doesn't want to see a nuclearized Iran. It's not in Turkey's interest, but Turkey has a structural interest in neighborly relations with Iran for all kinds of economic and energy reasons and other things. So Turkey's sitting on the UN Security Council now, faced with the fact that there's likely to be a vote in the UN Security Council on sanctions for Iran, is going to have to choose. What's Turkey going to do? Is it going to vote yes? Is it going to vote no? Is it going to abstain? And these pressures are not, and I'll end on this, not going to be simple ones. I mean, it's easy to say it'll just be the West pressing for Turkey to say yes, and maybe, Iranians and Chinese and maybe Russians pressing for Turkey to abstain or something like that. It's not so simple because presumably some of Turkey's partners in the Gulf who are equally, if not more concerned about a nuclearizing Iran, are also going to be pressuring Turkey to say yes on this thing, to forestall other kinds of actions over the issue. So it's a complicated scene. I don't think the Western piece of it is the one that's changing most rapidly, but it's affected by all these other things that we've been discussing. So thank you.
Thank you, Ian. We'll be revisiting these things. I'm sure we'll have things to say about Iran. I just offer one quick thought on the question of democratization in Turkey as well. I'm struck by how much Washington and the American political culture in general seems to assume that the more democratic a country becomes, the better relations that Washington will have with it. So if you could overthrow Saddam, the new Iraqi regime will do what will like you, or if you can change if democracy comes to other states, that they will be more pro-American. I think this is a rather naive view, not because of anything to do with the United States, but the assumption that there are no genuine differences of interest. And sometimes when two states are democratic, they may not go to war with each other over it, but they could maybe express more violently, more vehemently, those differences between them. Democracy is not changing the game. Next, we turn to Joost Lagendijk on Turkey and the EU in greater detail.
I have to say it's always a challenge to explain the EU in Washington, let alone Turkey-EU relations. So I might sometimes think that people know how the EU works, but that might not always be the case. I will distinguish in three levels. One is the official, I would say, technical negotiations between Turkey and the EU. Secondly, the political reforms that are necessary inside Turkey to bring it closer to EU membership. And thirdly, public opinion, the public debate, both in the EU and in Turkey. Now, on the first part, the technical negotiations between basically civil servants from the European Commission and Turkish civil servants to bring Turkish laws into line with the so-called EU acquis. That started in 2005. That's divided in 35 chapters. That, and that is important, can only be opened and closed unanimously. So there needs to be unanimity among all EU member states, all 27 EU member states. Now the problem is that half of those chapters, 18 to be fully correct, are blocked. They cannot be opened, let alone closed, because either the EU itself or France or Cyprus unilaterally have declared that they don't want these chapters to be opened, and because they have a veto right, they won't be opened. That means that at the end of there are 4 chapters left to be opened. That's up to Turkey to meet the so-called benchmarks. That might happen this year, might happen at the beginning of next year. If that has happened, we've run out of chapters. We can't technically negotiate anymore about Turkish EU membership. In that respect, it's crucial what happens to the Cyprus problem. I would need another 15 minutes to explain the Cyprus issue, or maybe even more. But as you may know, there are negotiations taking place on the island to find a solution. Being an optimist, I think there's a 50-50% chance that there is a solution. And that's important for Turkey-EU relations, because if there is a solution, there's a deal between the two communities on the island, then a lot of these blocked chapters will be opened up, and Turkey and the EU can continue negotiating even after the 4 present chapters have been opened. If there is no deal, then we face serious deadlock in Turkey-EU negotiations at the end of this year or the beginning of next year. Now, it's important to state, and that is it's a big misunderstanding in Turkey, but sometimes also in the EU, that I'm convinced that the EU, even if there's a deadlock, will never decide to stop the negotiations. It's important to underline that for procedural reasons, because to stop, you also need unanimity, and that will never be there, and for political reasons. I mean, countries like the UK, Sweden, Spain, Italy, strong defenders of Turkey's EU membership, will never accept to break and to say, we made a mistake in 2004, let's stop the whole business. So that's not going to happen. The only country that can stop the negotiations is Turkey. Turkey can, of course, say, we withdraw. We've fed up with it, all these vetoes, blockages, it doesn't lead us anywhere. And that is, of course, exactly what the opponents of Turkey's accession to the EU wants it to do. I mean, Mr. Sarkozy, you would make his day if Turkey would say at the end of this year or the beginning of next year, we had enough of it, we will stop. That's exactly what he tries to do with all these provocations. And I don't think Turkey will do it. I mean, you might criticize some of its leaders, but I think they're not stupid enough to fall into that trap. So Turkey will also not quit the game. What will happen is that there will be growing frustration inside Turkey about the EU, especially why the EU, why EU member states allow Cyprus to play such a role within the EU. I mean, it's a small country. There are 26 other states that could overrule it. And that has happened in the past with other small countries. It doesn't happen because there are some countries in the EU that are quite happy with Cyprus being in the front, trying to stop Turkey. Countries like France, Austria are quite happy with that. What might happen, again, if there's no solution to the Cyprus issue, that Turkey-EU will end in a sort of deadlock. Negotiations will officially be there, but there won't be any content. That is a situation that can't last forever. And I think Turkey is hoping then, or will be hoping then, that at the end of the day, countries like the UK, the Swedes, the Mediterranean countries will put enough pressure on Cyprus to lift its unilateral vetoes. But that's not quite sure. It also depends how these negotiations that are now taking place will end. So that's one level. Prospects, to be honest, quite dim, because the 50-50 chance of a Cyprus solution is probably due to my optimistic character. Some would even say that it's 70% chance of a failure and only 30% of a success. Now, there's a strong contrast, funny enough, with the official level of negotiation, the technical ones, and the political reform process in Turkey. There has been talk about it, of course, in the first part of this panel. I think for the first time on all the major issues put into all the EU reports over the last 8 years. In the European Commission reports, in the European Parliament reports, there's a sort of top 5 of issues that we, the Europeans, expect Turkey to deal with. It's the Kurdish issue, it's the Alevi issue, civil-military relations, its relations with Armenia, making a new constitution. Now, on all those issues, Turkey has come to a point, the Turkish government has come to a point, that it has promised a lot on all of those issues. And in that sense, 2010 is a make or break year. I know this is said every year about Turkey-EU relations, but this time I think there are a lot of Europeans waiting for the Turkish government to deliver on those promises, which would mean that even if they don't deliver on all issues, at least on 3 or 4 of them, that would be a huge step forward, and it would bring Turkey really closer to the EU.